Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be discussing why you might not feel fully recovered, even though you're training, sleeping enough, and typically doing the right things for your health. Now, that's something I see with a lot of the clients I work with. These are men that are leading exceptionally busy lives, and it's not that they're not doing anything. They're training alongside leading their businesses, dealing with life stresses, but even with doing all the right things, their body never feels quite really caught up. And what usually happens is we typically look for the most obvious fix. And it might be that they need to rest more, maybe needing a better supplementation, or even trying to rejig their training plan. But sometimes those things matter, but very often the issue is a lot more simpler than that. It's that the week that they're living isn't set up in a way where their body can fully recover from. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I think about this with the clients we work with, what I look at when recovery is poor, and how we improved one of our clients' Whoop recovery score over the course of a month from being deep in the red to getting consistent greens. And for those of you that are new to the channel, my name is Harsha and I'm the founder of Legacy Health, where we use diagnostics and medical testing to enhance and optimize health and performance for the clients we work with. Now, the first thing we need to understand is that recovery is not just what happens after a workout, and that's how most people think about it. You train and then you have to go through some recovery. I believe that's half complete. That's not the full story here. Your body's also recovering from the rest of the stresses you go through in life, whether that might be the demanding business you're working in, the late nights, the travel, poor food timing, and the inconsistent sleep that also comes with it. And that's why two people can follow the same training plan and have completely two different outcomes. For one person, the session might, 3 sessions a week might feel manageable when it comes to training, and for another person, the exact same 3 sessions might feel like too much, because the life around those sessions is completely different. So when I review someone's recovery, I'm not just looking at the workout, I'm looking at the week in its entirety. What was the body actually being asked to absorb? Like what kind of stresses and other factors or variables were there in the week that affected your recovery? And that's the better question and the better starting point to go from. And when you look at it from that angle, poor recovery starts to make a lot more sense, rather than just looking at it from the training perspective. So let me show you how this looked like with a client we worked with recently. So he was a bank executive. And as you can see on the screen here, we have his Whoop data across the course of a few weeks or just over a month. But let me just explain some of the thinking behind it first. So our client was training consistently, not excessively. He was in the gym for 3 days of the week. He wasn't doing anything that extreme, simply trying to stay in shape and improve his baseline level of fitness, maintain his energy, and keeping his body performing well whilst living this really demanding schedule. For further context, he was a new dad as well, so managing a very demanding career, but also managing a new family. And across the first month, his Whoop score was lower and less consistent than we ideally wanted. And the easy mistake would be to look at the score and say, you just need a bit more rest. I think that's quite generic in its thinking. But to be more precise, a low recovery score isn't the full diagnosis. It gives us a signal. And the more useful question or the way of framing it is, what is that signal reflecting about the individual? So we looked at the recovery trend alongside the rest of his week. As you can see, we can see a lot of amber scores, sitting in the mid 50s at the max, and a few red scores dotted throughout, which is less than ideal. The lower recovery days weren't random at all. It made a lot of sense because those tended to appear across points in the week where life load is already high. These are days where he was dealing with his new child, who was obviously up throughout the night, but also dealing with excessive work demands. So sleep was shorter, evenings were a lot later, and work demands obviously were quite extensive. And sometimes harder training days was sitting too close to those days, and they were too stacked. So instead of trying to hack the Whoop score, we changed the inputs in creating it. We moved some of the harder training workouts, or harder training days rather, away from the highest pressure parts of the week. So we protected a more reliable sleep window. We stopped pairing late evenings with these early hard sessions where possible, because he did train in the mornings prior to starting his workday. Across the month, his recovery score improved with those adjustments, with those changes being made according to his schedule. And it's just really understanding here why it's improved. It improved because the week underneath that score improved, right? It's because we changed the inputs over time. And the key point here is this is how wearable data should be used. It's not something to panic over. As you can see here, there are a few red scores and there are a few yellow scores. And even going after, you can see as the recovery has trended upwards into the green, where we see more green than we do yellow. There's still a few yellow scores, but that's nothing to be worried about. And I guess and the main thing here is not to obey these scores blindly, but again, it gives you a good instrument panel to go off. And overall, that's why most people misread their recovery, and where many people go wrong. They treat the recovery as if it's one isolated event, one isolated thing. They may look at one poor night of sleep, a bad workout, or a low recovery score, your Whoop date score being in the red. And that's why recovery has to be interpreted in context. A wearable can tell you that something's off, but it can't fully understand your calendar. It doesn't have that context. It doesn't know how mentally demanding your day was. It doesn't know how late that client dinner ran into the evening. It doesn't know how that you trained early because that was the only slot available, even though your sleep was already compromised. So that's where the interpretation matters. And that's also why generic recovery advice doesn't solve this problem, because the answer isn't always to sleep more, nor is it to train less or take a new supplement. But sometimes the answer is that week needs to be arranged in a much more intelligent fashion. And the first thing I look at is sleep opportunity. This isn't about any kind of deep sleep hack or a new supplement stack that I'm going to introduce to you. But the basic question is, are you giving your body a realistic chance to sleep well? And a lot of people want 7 or 8 hours of sleep, but the calendar doesn't always allow for it. Work runs late, we can't always control that. Life demands happen, family demands happen, and your mind just ends up staying switched on, and that's sometimes way out of our control. Logically, your next day follows, and you have an early training session to wake up to, and getting prepped for the next day. So the issue is not that you're necessarily bad at sleeping. The issue is more so that the evening and morning is not giving you the room or the capacity to sleep enough or to recover properly. So for some clients, that's usually the biggest constraint. What might feed into that is having caffeine too late in the evening or too late in the day. Usually we give a cutoff to our clients who are overly caffeine sensitive to have their cutoff at around 12 p.m. That's because caffeine can still remain in your system 6 to 7 hours after consuming it. And maybe your work bleeds into the evening. Maybe training is a bit too late or too early for the sleep that you're currently getting. And it's really important to note that one good night of sleep isn't going to fix a week that is already highly compressing your sleep architecture. So ensuring that things like caffeine consumption and cutting it earlier, avoiding alcohol at night, because that also impedes one's ability to get into a much more restorative state of sleep, and looking at measures like that. So it's not trying to get that perfect 7 to 8 hours, but what can we do to impede the quality of the sleep less than it is currently? So the next thing I look at is around training placement. So it's understanding that even though you have these intense periods of work and life, training is not the villain here. And for the most of the men I work with, training is something we absolutely endeavor to keep and advocate for, because more than just supporting body composition, it does help with energy overall. It does enhance with mental well-being, your confidence, and long-term health. But training only works if the body can adapt to it. So completing the session is not necessarily the whole win. The body still has to recover from that session and become better because of it. There's no point in grinding to the point where you're burnt out and sore from a workout and not giving your body the chance to recover so it develops adaptations to become healthy and stronger. It's really quite counterintuitive just to keep pushing and burning your body thinking it's going to do any kind of positive net gain for you when you're not adding the recovery element to it as well. The timing here is what matters. It's understanding if the hardest session of the week is sitting after the worst sleep night that you have across the week, that may be a problem. If a high intensity workout is placed right next to travel, late meals, and a heavy workday, that may be a problem. Not because, like I said, it's not because the workouts themselves are bad or wrong, but again, you're making your body pay more, pay too much at once. It's not necessarily to fix less, but it's to fix the sequence the week better to allow for that recovery. So typically we do keep the training in terms of frequency. If it's 3 days a week, we would still keep it to 3 days a week, but we reduce unnecessary costs. So the hardest session, we may move it to a day where recovery is more available, where we know there's not as much extensive traveling, or days where there might be a bit more capacity to recover and rest. And we use easier movement on those days where work and life are already heavy. And the idea here is, so long as you keep moving, you're still keeping your heart rate up, you're getting blood flow into the muscles. That's still a win, rather than being able to complete the exact training that was prescribed. And it's a much more better solution overall than just telling someone just to have more rest days. It's just learning how to be adaptable and flexible during these demanding times. And the third thing I look at is stress stacking. And that's when several recovery demands are all land at the same time. Someone might be in a heavy work period, they're sleeping less, training hard, tightening their diet and using more caffeine, and still trying to maintain the same semblance of social life. But none of those things are automatically wrong on their own. But the problem is trying to combine all these things at once. And that's where people who are very much type A driven often get caught. It's trying to do all these things at once, because you will start to feel your health slipping. In doing so, you feel like you need to tighten things up a bit more, be a bit more disciplined. But oftentimes, trying to push through it all, trying to push harder, thinking that's going to be, that's the answer, adds more load to the system, to a system that is already struggling to recover. So the smarter move is to decide which variable needs to give for that week. It's a system of trade-offs rather than trying to do everything at once. If work pressure is high, maybe your diet doesn't need to be so aggressive. Maybe maybe carbs need to be adjusted and added in for extra stress and the extra levels of cortisol that you're experiencing during the week. And if traveling is much more frequent during the week, maybe you have many flights to catch, maybe you're just not situated in one place for too long, maybe 2 well-placed training sessions are better than 4 compromised ones. It's making sure that you're still getting something done than trying to get everything done. And if your sleep has been poor consistently, maybe you keep movement in something light. Maybe it could be a lighter workout and reducing that intensity for a few days. So the principle here is that you're not lowering your standards as such, but it's making the plan fit the life that you're already living. So if you're watching this and you rarely feel fully recovered, this is how I would start. Look back at the week and put your recovery data next to your calendar. Just very honestly, look at it. How busy or how full is your calendar on that day? And then look at the inputs you're giving it. Is it the sleep? Is it training? Is it your diet? What's going on during that day and during that week? Look at the days where recovery was poor, or your energy felt flat, and then look at what happened around them. Very often the pattern becomes quite obvious. Maybe the poor recovery followed a late dinner or a short sleep window. Maybe the hardest session was placed after the most demanding workday. Maybe caffeine crept later into the day than you wanted to, because your energy was already low, your alertness levels were already low. I think just hold back on the judgment here and just accept that your body was responding to what you were giving it. So once you can see this pattern happening over time, there's no need to overhaul everything at once, but making 1 or 2 changes that are sustainable. Whether that be moving the hardest session, protecting that sleep window a bit better, or reducing the unnecessary training volume during a heavy work period. And even thinking about things like not trying to push a heavy calorie deficit during a time where sleep is still falling apart and training isn't that consistent. And then the key here is that we want to review this trend over the next 7 to 14 days. It's not looking at these one-off isolated events where you might have poor recovery, but how's the trend looking over time? And the reason I care about this is because recovery is not a soft topic. Recovery is what allows hard work to produce a return for someone. If you train and recover properly, the body adapts. If you sleep well enough, cognition and decision making feel much better protected. If your week is recoverable, energy becomes much more predictable for you, and it's something that you can execute and use on demand. And uh, it's something that you have more control and an agency over. But when your recovery is poor, everything starts to cost a lot more. That same training creates even more fatigue that than the body can handle. That same workday needs more caffeine to get you through the day, and that week ends up leaving you with a lot less margin than you called for. So you can still function like that for a while till you can't, because that's when how burnout happens. That's how people get into ill health, right? It's by pushing and going off, running on fumes and steam when the body is already compromised. And that cost shows up in a myriad of ways, right? That cost shows up in your body composition. It shows up in your cardiovascular capacity, your biomarkers, sleep, mood, and your ability to keep performing without constantly forcing it. And that's why I see recovery as a part of what I call biological capital. It's your ability to have this reserve of energy which you can allocate and as and per your choice and when you want to, because your body's not separate from your work. It really is the operating system that runs underneath it. And if your operating system is constantly under recovered, everything built on top of it becomes much less stable. So if you do have any questions on recovery, how to structure your week better, or just generally any other questions you had from this video, please drop a question in the comments. Otherwise, I will catch you in the next video.